Welcome to Friday's edition of Renew Plus. I'm Pastor Tony. Thank you for joining us here at the end of week number 1 of our series we've entitled The Rest Area, just as if sin never existed in our life. Now, this is not a fantasy. This is a reality as we're finding out. Now, how can we make such an audacious statement as that God is looking at us and treating us just as if sin never existed? Well, it certainly couldn't be because we've earned or deserved it. It could only happen because God did this by grace and provided it by His abundant, overflowing grace. It's, again, all about God and what He does for us that we cannot do for ourselves. That is what grace is. And then we receive that by faith. We receive and accept that reality now by our faith. Now, I want to look at here at the end of this week, I want to give a couple of examples, and if we don't finish up today, we'll pick it up again next week, at the beginning of next week. But we want to look at a couple of examples in the life and the ministry of Jesus, where we really see this kind of thing played out right here. In fact, the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 14 and verse 16, says that Jesus came full of grace and truth. It says, whereas the law was given through Moses, Jesus came full of grace and truth. In other words, the law of Moses required and demanded of man, but we could never actually earn or deserve or perform or deserve any of these things by keeping the works of the law. So Jesus came and provided grace. He was full of grace and truth. We see in the life and the ministry of Jesus that He healed multitudes. He fed multitudes. He delivered people. He raised people from the dead. He blessed people just as if they'd never sinned. Now, every one of those people, there's not a one person that Jesus healed, not a one person that were delivered or blessed in under His ministry that deserved what they got from Jesus. It was all because of grace. So Jesus was setting the standard and laying the foundation for the new covenant. The new covenant is all based on grace and is all received by by our faith. But it's all because of the finished work of Jesus. Not our works, but His work, His finished work. Now, I want to look first of all at Matthew chapter 8. Matthew the 8th chapter. Great story here. About the Roman centurion. Now, the Roman centurion, of course, was not under the covenants of Israel. In other words, he was a stranger from the covenant of promise. He was an outsider. So from the standpoint of being a covenant person with God, even the covenant of Abraham or anything, he was an outsider. He didn't deserve any of this stuff. But he didn't come on the basis of who he was or what he could do or what he had done. He came on the basis of mercy and grace. I want you to see how this plays out, beginning with verse number 5. Matthew 8, verse 5 and following. It says, "Now when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him, saying, 'Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed, dreadfully tormented.'" Now again, Roman centurion, he was an outsider. He couldn't expect anything from the Abrahamic covenant. He had to approach Jesus based on grace and mercy. So notice what Jesus responds here in verse number 7. "And Jesus said to him, 'I will come and heal him.'" Notice, he said he recognized faith in this guy. He said, "I will come and heal him." Verse number 8, "And the centurion answered and said, 'Lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak a word, and my servant will be healed.'" So notice, he recognized his own personal unworthiness. But you know what? That didn't stop him from placing a demand on the grace that he recognized in Jesus. Even though he knew in and of himself he was not worthy, in his own self he was non-deserving of any of this, what Jesus was going to do for him, he came in faith just solely on the basis of grace and mercy. And so he said, "I'm not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak a word, and my servant will be healed." So he said, "Jesus, you don't even have to come under my roof. Just speak a word right where you are." And so this got Jesus' attention. Verse 9 and following, he says, "For I also am a man under authority, having soldiers under me, and I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. In verse 10, and Jesus heard it, he marveled. He marveled. There are incidences where Jesus marveled at unbelief, people in his own hometown, but he was marveling at this man's faith. Again, this is an outsider here. He heard it, he marveled, and he said to those who followed, assuredly I say to you, I have not found such great faith, no, not in Israel. In other words, the law didn't produce faith. The law produced unbelief and doubt because it put the spotlight on the individual and their personal performance. But this man didn't have any of that. He came just strictly focused on the grace of God in Jesus. And notice Jesus said, I have not found such great faith, no, not in Israel. Now, I know there's some other points we can make about that. The man understood authority and those kind of things, and not be all relevant to him having great faith. But the basis for this man's great faith was even in the face of his own personal unworthiness, he believed that the grace of God was great enough, greater than his problem, greater than his situation, and would provide an answer to his time of need. And so Jesus goes on. Let's just read in verse 11. It says, and I say to you that many will come from the east and west and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But to the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness. There'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So notice verse number 13. Verse 13, then Jesus said to the centurion. Notice he had just complimented this man for having great faith. Great faith meant that his focus wasn't in him, it was in the grace of God in Jesus, that he recognized in Jesus. So Jesus said to the centurion, go your way, and as you have believed, so let it be done for you. I tell you what, that is what Jesus just said to this man. Totally upends a lot of religious traditional teaching right here. Notice he says to this man, go your way, and as you have believed, so let it be done for you. The Williams translation says it this way, go, it must be done for you as you have believed. Now, religious tradition has told us that God just by whim and who knows why, he works in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform, and he just kind of picks and chooses whom he blesses and who he's going to heal and who he's going to do things good for in their life. And we don't always know. And you know, some people, maybe they've done better than others and they perform better than others. I want you to see it was not based on this man's performance, what he deserved or earned. It was all on the basis of his faith and believing. And Jesus said to him, go your way, and as you have believed, so let that be done for you as you have believed. I tell you, that's tremendous right there. He basically put it all in this man's court and said, hey, as you have believed, let it be done for you as you have believed. Now, what if Jesus were to come to us and say the same thing? In essence, that's really what he's saying to all of us. As we have believed, so let it be done for us. Well, we're basically are getting what we believe in life. And if we're believing that we're just not good enough, we're unworthy, we're undeserving, we haven't done enough good works, we've done too many bad works, you know, the focus is all based on us and what we've done and our works and all that kind of stuff, then we're basically going to talk ourselves out of and disqualify ourselves from receiving what Jesus could and wants to do in our life. Notice that this didn't disrupt Jesus. His faith didn't disrupt Jesus. What was driving this whole scenario right here is what this man believed. It was his faith. His faith in the grace of God and what it could do that this man could not perform, earn, or deserve. And so Jesus just gave him a blank check. He just told him to write his own ticket, basically. He said, go your way, and as you have believed, so let it be done for you. Now guess what happened? This man believed, and it says, and his servant was healed that same hour. So he got what he believed. He got according to what he could believe in the grace of God. He came to the throne of grace boldly, and took help in a time of need. Now let's look at another situation here. It's also in Matthew's Gospel it's in Mark's Gospel, chapter 10. Mark chapter 10. And notice this right here. Mark the 10th chapter. Same kind of scenario here. We see a lot of people receiving from Jesus' ministry based on their faith. Not based on their earning or deserving, but based on their faith, what they believe. So here in Mark chapter 10, verse 46, it says, "Now they came to Jericho, Jesus and his disciples, and he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great multitude. Blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the road begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, 'Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me.'" All right, so what is the basis for blind Bartimaeus approaching Jesus right here? All on the basis of mercy and grace, not based on what he had done. He was crying out when he heard Jesus go by. He had probably heard about Jesus, heard what he had done, and the things that he had done. He began to cry out, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Verse 49 or verse 48. Then many warned him to be quiet. Sounds like some of the churches I've been in and been involved with in the past. Then many warned him to be quiet. So people are always going to quieten you down when you're talking in faith. And he said, but he cried out all the more. In other words, he doubled down right here. He said, "Son of David, have mercy on me." So he just cried out all the more. He was not going to be denied. He was not going to let this opportunity for him receiving from the grace of God pass by that day. So verse 49, Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. Then they called the blind man, saying to him, "Be of good cheer, arise, he's calling you." Verse 50, and throwing aside his garment, he rose and came to Jesus. Now, many kind of passed by that verse right there, but that's a very significant verse right there. The fact that he threw aside his garment when he went to Jesus. This garment identified him as a blind and a beggar man. It was a specific garment that he had on that identified him as a blind beggar. So notice when Jesus called him, when he got up to go to Jesus, he threw that garment aside. Why? Because his identity was changing. The grace and the mercy of God was about to change his identity and change his destiny and change what he was receiving from Jesus in life. Now verse number 41. So Jesus answered and said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" See, this is what the grace of God is asking all of us. What do you want me to do for you? I know that does not fit in most religious mindsets and traditional thinking, that we could think that God would ask us what we wanted. You know, I've heard a lot of people say, well, God will give you what you need, but he don't care about what you desire or want. No, God will give you both of them, as long as your wants and your desires line up with the rest of the Word. In other words, it's not something off the wall and stupid, and I'm not even going to address it. I'm not even taking time to address that. But listen, Jesus is asking us, grace is asking us, what do you want me to do for you? Just come and ask. Just come to the throne of grace. Find some mercy and grace to help you in a time of need. That's what he's asking us today. Now, you know, blind Bartimaeus could have said, well, if I could just have enough to eat for today and maybe tomorrow, that'd just be good enough, just sufficient for today. But you know what? Bartimaeus had the big fish in mind. He didn't want just to get by for today. Man, he wanted to be healed of that blindness. So you know what? Grace was asking him. He believed in the mercy and the grace of God was greater than his need. He just got bold and asked him. So Jesus answered and said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "Rabboni, that I may receive my sight." Now, Luke chapter 18 records this same incident right here. And I like Jesus' response from Luke 18. When he said, "that I may receive my sight." Luke 18, 41 through 42 reads this way. Jesus answered, "Receive your sight." Just simply as that. Receive your sight. Your faith has made you well. The man said that I may receive my sight. And Jesus said, receive your sight. That's what the grace of God asked us, what do you want? And we say, Lord, that I would have this. You know what the grace of God does? The grace of God says, receive it. Just take it. Just take it because it belongs to you. The grace of God's already provided it. When he says receive your sight, that means the grace of God has already provided healing in his eyes. That means the grace of God has already provided restoration in his eyesight. So Jesus just simply said, receive your sight. And then he said, your faith has made you well. Your faith is involved in receiving what the grace of God has given to us. The grace of God's asking you today, what do you want? Come and ask. Come and receive. Come to the throne of grace and take it. Let your faith focus and receive what the grace of God has provided and given to us. Verse 52 in Mark chapter 10 said, Jesus said to him, go your way, your faith has made you well. And immediately he received his sight, and he followed Jesus on the road. He got exactly what he believed for. He got exactly what his faith could receive from Jesus that day. Awesome things. And that's what the grace of God is providing for us at the throne of grace. That's a good time and a good place to finish this first week of the rest area off. We'll pick up here next week. If you'd like additional materials, go to tonycowan.org. We'll see you next week.